How much money per hour do you think you need to make in order to have a comfortable living wage in Alberta? Well, I took a walk around to figure out what people here think it should be.
I'd say $30 because it's absolutely horrible. I can't imagine making a minimum wage in Alberta.
I need $40 to $50 an hour to pay my mortgage and buy grocery.
I think 30 would be a good guess.
Those guesses were not far off. In Edmonton, it's $22.30 per hour, up 7% from last year, and in Calgary, it's $26.50 per hour, up 8.4%. The Alberta Living Wage Network calculates living wages in 21 communities, and in 2025, the living wage increased for 15 of those. The network says it's in part due to changes in childcare, shelter, and transportation costs.
If you look at the numbers just released for Vancouver and Victoria and Toronto, then yeah, you can see that we're still more affordable. But Calgary is creeping up to get kind of close to those places.
Some communities where the living wage went down include Fort McMurray, Rocky Mountain House, and Cold Lake. The Living Wage Network says this has a lot to do with the province's revamped childcare affordability program. However, it notes most communities were better off without it.
In communities that have high childcare rates, that helped and made their childcare rates go down. But for those that were more average, people are paying more this year.
Meanwhile, those in the community feel like life is becoming more unaffordable, especially around basic needs.
I don't live luxury living. It's just the regular expenses for me.
The cost of living, especially the commodities, is going out of hand is what I feel.
If you miss a bunch of work because you got sick or you got hurt, you don't make rent, you don't, you go buy groceries or you don't. Or even then, it's like, what options do you have?
The living wage is the hourly wage a worker needs to cover their basic expenses and participate in their community.
In today's world, millions of people deliver our food, drive us across town, serve us at restaurants, and make sure our everyday conveniences run smoothly. But behind the smiles, behind the efficiency, behind the "your order has arrived" notifications, lies a deeper question that society has tiptoed around for decades. Is the gig economy, built on tips instead of guaranteed wages, actually broken? Are workers being paid fairly? Are companies relying on consumers to subsidize labor? And is tipping still an act of gratitude, or has it become an obligation manipulated by modern platforms? Today, we're diving deep into the history, the economics, the psychology, and the real human experiences behind the minimum wage versus tipping debate. Welcome to Minimum Wage versus Tipping. Is the gig economy broken?
Have you ever given your Uber driver 4 stars? Because the ride was good, but not amazing. Here's the problem. In the gig economy, 4 stars is not a good rating. In fact, it's a threat. Platforms like Uber and DoorDash expect drivers to keep a very high average rating, like a 4.6 or a 4.7. Out of 5, we're rating like professors grade, where 4 stars is good and 5 stars is only reserved for really excellent work. But in gig work, 5 stars just means you're still allowed to work here tomorrow. So if your ride was fine, safe, polite, got you where you need to go, give 5 stars. When we understand how the system works, we see that power that we have as customers, and we can use that power for good. Have you ever...
To understand how we got here, we have to go back, way back. Tipping didn't start in America. It began in medieval Europe, where wealthy nobles offered small sums to servants, mostly as a way of saying, "I am above you, but I acknowledge your service." When tipping came to the United States after the Civil War, it took on a very different meaning. Many employers, especially in the hospitality industry, saw tipping as a convenient way to avoid paying wages at all. They pushed the responsibility onto customers. Workers, many of whom were formerly enslaved Black Americans, were expected to survive on tips alone. And that legacy? It still influences labor practices today.
Does the gig economy give workers new freedoms, or does it mean greater
In most industries, employees earn at least the federal minimum wage. But in tipped industries, the rules change. As technology advanced, tipping expanded far beyond restaurants. Rideshare drivers, delivery workers, grocery shoppers, personal shoppers, maid services, freelance taskers, streaming and content creators. Millions of workers joined the gig economy for flexibility, independence, and additional income. But the reality turned out to be more complicated. Apps began shifting pay structures around, sometimes quietly. Drivers and delivery workers reported that companies started using tips to subsidize wages, meaning the more customers tipped, the less the company paid out of pocket. Some platforms were later forced to change policies after public backlash. But trust had already been broken. The line between tip and wage was now blurred, and workers were caught in the middle.
The UCP just voted against Alberta workers making a little more money. It's incredibly disappointing. This is the top issue for most Albertans, that their wages haven't kept up with their costs and they can no longer afford the basics like rent and food. We brought forward a real proposal that would have given the lowest paid workers a little bit of a boost. Alberta has the lowest minimum wage in the country. It hasn't gone up in 7 years. Businesses asked for a minimum wage change to be phased in, and that's exactly what we did. Far from being a radical proposal, this proposal would have taken us up $1 immediately, another $1 next year, and to $18 in 2027. Albertans deserve better. They deserve a government who understands the reality that they are living. They deserve higher wages. They deserve an economy where everyone has the chance to prosper. And today, the UCP voted against it.
Something else shifted in the past few years. Suddenly, everyone was asking for tips. Touchscreen terminals at coffee shops, fast food chains, retail counters, self-checkout kiosks, even places where no tipping culture ever existed. And the pressure? It's everywhere. A tablet flips around. A selection of 20%, 25%, or even 30% appears. While the employee watches, while the people behind you wait, and suddenly you're tipping for things no one tipped for a decade ago. What used to be a thank you became a social expectation. What used to be optional became guilt-driven. What used to be generosity became an emotional transaction. Consumers began to feel squeezed. Workers began to feel blamed. And companies continued to benefit quietly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is an open secret that the gig economy is a magnet for organised crime and illegal workers. As Christmas approaches and demand increases, so do the associated risks. Will the Prime Minister please explain why enforcement in this area is so low and what he will do to restore order?
Well, we're delivering a record crackdown on illegal working in the gig economy, expanding the right to work and facial recognition checks, which are really important. We're also introducing a new criminal offence of trespassing with intent to commit a crime through the Place and Criming Bill.
Here's where things get complicated. Customers feel tired. They feel tip fatigue. They feel like they're being asked to pay more for the same service, or for service that used to be included. Meanwhile, workers feel unseen, underpaid, undervalued, dependent on strangers' generosity to survive. Neither group is the enemy. The frustration is real on both sides. But the real issue lies in the structure. Corporations reduce base pay. Apps shift risk onto workers. Companies save billions in labor costs. And consumers are silently asked to fill the gap. This isn't a disagreement between workers and customers. It's a system that relies on both being frustrated. So the companies don't have to fix anything. Let's talk psychology. Tipping affects self-worth, stress levels, a job satisfaction, mental health. When your income depends on tips, every interaction matters. A rude customer doesn't just hurt your feelings, they might cost you dinner. A slow shift doesn't just mean boredom, it means unpaid bills. This creates what psychologists call income insecurity stress. On the customer side, tipping has become a moral test. Am I a good person? Do they think I'm cheap? Do I have to tip even though they barely interacted with me? In other words, tipping is no longer just financial. It's emotional.
The minimum wage is an apocalyptic policy. Consider John, who's paid $3 an hour to sweep floors and clean toilets. His boss would like to pay him less, ideally nothing, but he cannot do this because John's boss is in competition with other capitalists who have bid John's wage up to $3 an hour. This sets a lower limit on how much his boss can get away with paying him. There's also an upper limit, set by how much extra revenue a capitalist can make by hiring John. Perhaps John produces only $4 an hour for a capitalist, thus nobody will be willing to pay him any more than this. Therefore, if a minimum wage of $9 an hour is set, John will not be able to find any work, thus encouraging capitalists to automate his job or ship it overseas. After all, if a minimum wage of say $15 an hour is good, why not $80 or $100 million, or set it to be the entire quantity of gold ever mined by humanity? After all, pieces of paper cannot make humanity richer, so if a minimum wage works, it should also work on a gold standard. What this all means is that a minimum wage implies that capital is shifted away from that optimal arrangement that the market tends towards, raising time preference in the process, which means that saving is reduced. Therefore, the minimum wage is destructive of current capital and a hampering force against future capital.
Here's something important. Not all workers want to eliminate tipping. In fact, many servers and bartenders firmly support the current system. Why? Because in busy restaurants, they can earn far more with tips than they would with a standard wage. A high-end bartender or restaurant server can make hundreds, or even thousands, a week in tips. Switching to a flat hourly wage might lower their income dramatically. So the debate isn't simple. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. Some workers want stability. Others want potential. It's a conversation filled with nuance, something we often lose in heated online debates.
With the current genocide in Gaza, they have changed the rules and decided that all the reservists, regardless of what they do in the reserve life, would receive 29,000 shekels per month. This is equivalent to about $9,000, more or less, per month, which is more than twice the average wage in Israel and more than 5 times the minimum wage in Israel. So it's a lot of money. And for tens of thousands of Israelis who lost their jobs, who lost their source of income and employment, and because they've served so long as reservists, and also because the Israeli economy is tanking, something that we will discuss more in our next episodes, then they see reserve duty and this very high salary as a way out. And they receive those tokens, they reserve tokens, as payment for serving in the military. But it's not only that the amount of money has been increased, but also the way that it is being paid is now different. Because normally the Ministry of Defense would just transfer the money directly to reservists, but now the officers themselves get those tokens to distribute as they see fit. Now, a lot of the units, I would say the vast majority of the units in the Israeli military are lacking key personnel. The units are not able to function. You cannot have like an armored division if you don't have drivers. The tanks won't go anywhere. So officers are advertising on WhatsApp and writing, we need drivers. And even if you're not from our unit, come and do some reserve duty in our unit as a tank driver, and we will pay you with those reserve duty tokens. And some jobs are so difficult and rare that the officers are saying, you know what, come and work for us for 4 days, but we will pay you 6 days, as if you've worked for 6 days. And this way, you really see how Israel is becoming a mercenary army. Basically, you have this army of soldiers who are not associated with particular units and wandering from one unit to the next as a gig economy military.
Gig workers don't get health insurance, retirement plans, sick days, vacation days, a worker's comp, a job security, and many spend their own money on a gas, car maintenance, phone data, equipment, insurance. When customers tip less, workers earn less. When gas prices rise, workers absorb the cost. When a delivery takes too long, the platform, not the customer, reduces pay. The worker carries all the risk. The platform carries all the profit. And every year the gap widens. Gig workers don't get health insurance, retirement plans, sick days, vacation days, a worker's comp, a job security, and many spend their own money on a gas, car maintenance, phone data, equipment, insurance. When customers tip less, workers earn less. When gas prices rise, workers absorb the cost. When a delivery takes too long, the platform, not the customer, reduces pay. The worker carries all the risk. The platform carries all the profit. And every year, the gap widens.
You can see all the three options for tipping. 20% used to be the high end, 18% was okay service, and 15% was just, your baseline. But now they want 25%, which, So the total here was $69 after it was all said and done, $93. You don't see that in Europe, guys. We need to get better.
So the food was... Is tipping universal? Not at all. In Japan, tipping is considered rude. In Australia, servers earn a strong minimum wage. In many European countries, service fees are already built into menu prices. Workers still provide excellent service without relying on tips to survive. This raises the question, if other countries can pay living wages without collapsing economically, why can't we?
How do we deal with autonomy? And I think these folks are an extreme example because they have way more autonomy than we have in work settings. But in work settings, we often have autonomy in some areas or others. And do we use that autonomy effectively? Do we use it in a way that brings the most joy to us and value to the company? So I think we have a lot to learn from these independent workers, even if we ourselves are working in a workplace.
So, is the gig economy broken? Yes. And no. And maybe. It works for some. It fails many others. It confuses everyone. But one thing is clear. A system built on emotional labor, unpredictable income, and shifting responsibility is not sustainable long term. The question is no longer, should we tip? The real question is, why are workers depending on tips to survive in the first place? If society wants fairness, transparency, and dignity for workers, we need to rethink not just tipping, but the entire structure of labor in the modern age.